Good afternoon, members. We formed a quorum, and this is the meeting of the Bills Committee on the Protection of Endangered Species of Animals and Plants Amendment Bill 2617, and this is the sixth meeting. Shall we invite the administration team to join us, please? Welcome the administration team. I'm not going to introduce you one by one because it is the same team who is attending all our meetings. Now, in the fifth meeting, the progress is this. We have started the clause-by-clause scrutiny, and we have finished with the Blue Bill, C1056. And that is to say, in relation to Part 2, the Clause 26, Section 5, we are finished with it. We're just finished with Section 5 on page 1056. And if members don't have any further questions, so can we ask the administration team, Dr. So, please brief us on Part 3 on page 1056 on re-export. Towards the end of this meeting, we're finished with Part 2, and that has to do with import. And Part 3, it's similar, but then this time we are dealing with re-export. So in Part 3, Section 6 is similar to Section 4 in Part 2. And we are saying that it is only under exceptional circumstances will the director approve the application in relation to elephant hunting trophy. Now, for elephant ivory, the conditions are more relaxed. If the director is satisfied that the specimen is pre-convention, the specimen is intended for use for scientific, educational, or law enforcement purposes, or there are exceptional circumstances justifying the approval. And in subsection 3, we define what we mean by re-export license application. So please continue. And sections 7 and 8 are dealing with the exemptions under the law, and if these are specimens of Appendix 1 as personal or household effects, according to Cap 586A, exemption is granted. So here again, we point out that Section 6 of Cap 568A, and that is re-export of specimens of Appendix 1 species acquired pre-convention. This is not applicable. The same goes for Section 8. And Section 7 has to do with Appendix 1 species. Section 8 has to do with Appendix 2 species. And Section 9, and we are on re-export of specimens of Appendix 2 species as personal or household effects acquired pre-convention. And this is similar to Section 7. We are dealing with Appendix 1 in that section, and Section 9 we're dealing with this Appendix 2 species. And that is the relevant section 7, Section 7 of Cap 586B. So this exemption does not apply here. All right. The Part 4, same situation. We have dealt with import, re-export, and in Part 4, we are handling possession or control. In Section 10, again, the same situation is seen. The director will only approve a possession license under exceptional circumstances. But in relation to possession, the director can approve the license or application if the specimen is pre-convention or the specimen is covered by a specified license that is valid on the date of the application. So in other words, if the specimen is pre-convention, the director can issue the license. And second, if the specimen is covered by a specified license, then the director can also issue a license. Mr. Peter Chiu, the administration in their earlier papers has made some points, and I would like to ask. Point 2 has to do with the French government. I will allow you to ask a question. I think I would like to finish this close-by-close scrutiny before we ask those questions. I'll give you 5 minutes in any case. Mr. Chiu, it says that the French government bans ivory trade, but then there are limited exemptions and concessions. And subsection 3 has to do with antique ivory products before 1947. But in Hong Kong, the line is drawn at 1925. Why not we following the 1947 line that the French government draws? And paragraph 8, well, last time we asked this, there was a ban of trade among EU states, but then it says that this is allowed under certain circumstances. And it says in paragraph 2, it says that for pre-convention ivory obtained before CITES provisions, and that is for Asian elephants, 1st of July 1975, African elephants, 26th of February 1976, and re-export license can be obtained for re-export. Now, Mrs. Kwok, please speak into the mic. In paragraphs 7 to 10, we would like to say something more on top of what we shared earlier in relation to the ivory trade among EU states. Earlier, we have shared this point. In a nutshell, the EU will adopt stricter measures than those required by CITES. And in paragraph 10, we said that after 1st of July 2017, all these raw ivory cannot be re-exported, and also the ivory trade among the EU states should abide by the relevant guidelines. And in paragraph 8, we said that there are certain circumstances which can still be approved, and this is a limited circumstances. For example, pre-convention ivory, when there is an accompanying re-export certificate, then this can be re-exported. Let me stress again that internationally there is a ban on ivory trade, and every country will work towards that goal. And this is very much a global campaign. Different jurisdictions will proceed with different pace depending on their own circumstances. For Hong Kong, we are very different from EU. In the 1980s, Hong Kong was very much an ivory trade center, and before the ban, there was a large amount of post-convention ivory in Hong Kong. And in the past several years, we see that there is great poaching of elephants. Every year, tens of thousands of elephants were killed. And Hong Kong has all along been criticized that since we have a market here, we will be a place where people will launder ivory. And internationally, CITES, under CITES, Hong Kong is a place of concern among 8 places of concern in terms of laundering of ivory and also poaching of elephants. So that's why Hong Kong has to do a thorough job. We have to go through a 3-step process to achieve a total ban of ivory trade. So this is how the situation is like in Hong Kong. And for our own ordinance, we do have exemptions, and the exemptions are suited to our own local needs. For example, there is an exemption in relation to antique ivory, and if it is for a scientific purpose, education purpose, law enforcement, there is also exemption. So this is the limited exemption which suits Hong Kong's own local situation, and we try to strike a balance here. I have a very simple question. We are now not allowing a lot of different activities. And the countries which have the certificates can re-export. Is it the case that we are different in Hong Kong? They can still do re-export while Hong Kong is not going to do it? Mrs. Kwok, well, there are different ways of handling in different jurisdictions. How come that these countries can re-export? Hong Kong is not allowed to. We do have a huge stock of ivory here. How come that we're not allowed to do that? Well, the situation in every place differs, but we do share a common goal, and the exemption that we are granting is well suited to Hong Kong's needs.
Mr. Siu, I'll give you more time later on. Now, the paper is worth reading, but I hope after we have done the clause-by-clause scrutiny, I'll give you enough time to continue with your question, okay? Dr. So, Blue Bill 27, C10618. Now, we were looking at clause 10. Yes, we look at section 10. But maybe you answer my question on the antique ivory. How come that they use 1947 but we use 1925? Now, if you get all your questions together, I'll give you time to do the Q&A. Yeah, okay. I have reserved at least 30 minutes for you to ask questions. Dr. So, can you please note the various questions, and we will deal with them afterwards. Now, on this particular point, we have given wording on review and then specified licenses. And then on 27, it amends the schedule, and we have laid down more stringent requirements to allow us to enforce the law. So we have 3 stages altogether. Now, first of all, we are going to add a few more definitions. One is the definition for antique ivory. Now, the proposal now is to refer to before the 1st of July 1925, and the ivory obtained including those from wildlife after poaching and then carrying out or taking out the ivory, or those that have been substantially modified, for example, sculptured. Now, thirdly, now if it's not a major kind of modification from the original state, but only minor changing, then there is also a timeline or a deadline. Now, as said in previous meeting, the antique ivory does not include those from poaching. Now, Mr. Siu's question on 1925, 1st of July. Now, this is mainly because we're looking at a few things. Number one, we want to see whether the handicrafts have antique value, and if it's not too many years ago, then we don't see that it has any antique value. And secondly, we've taken reference from other jurisdictions. Now, Mr. Siu, your question, okay, well, on, let's say, the European Union, now in Europe, they use a section 33897, and their definition for ivory relies on the enforcement before the 33897 comes into force. Now, we have used 50 years pre-convention as the dividing line, so giving us 1925 July 1. Now, I'm sorry, I'd like to ask, now, for the Europe, the 33897 rule, so which year are you talking about? That means 1947. Now, we arrived at this timeline because of various reasons, and we've actually said this on past occasions. Now, if we use a scientific method to estimate the age of the ivory, then we will be damaging the substance. And secondly, we don't really have any laboratories in Hong Kong to do this. We have to send them overseas. And then, if you look at the ivory products, especially antiques, there will inevitably be sculpting on the ivory. And if you just look at the style of the sculpture to assess whether it's new or old, and if we set 1925, then we're going to be able to separate antique from non-antiques more easily. Because if you look at the history of ivory sculpture in Hong Kong, now in the Qing dynasty, let's say until 1911 or thereabouts, the sculpture was more meticulous. But from 1949 onwards, during the wartime, there was a long period of time where there were very few ivory products, and the handiwork deteriorated. Now, in Hong Kong, if you go back to the 1960s and 70s, the trade, rebounded. And if you look at the various hand skills, starting from the 1910 or thereabouts, so you had more meticulous crafting, and then also in the 60s and 70s, the skill re-emerged. And as a result of that, there was a long period of time in between where the hand skill was not really developed. So if you set the line at July 1st, 1925, then looking at the skill and style of the sculpture, we'll be able to ascertain the age of the substance to see whether it's antique or not. And therefore, we set the line on July 1st, 1925. Mr. Siu. Now, this is to convenience your work. Now, you mentioned other countries using 1947, but now you are using 1925 to make it easier for your work. And you mentioned Qing dynasty or pre-1949. But how do we work together with other countries if they draw the line at 1947 or 46, but then we draw the line at 1925? Then how can we cooperate or work with other countries? Now, so the question now is, how come other jurisdictions can use 1947 and they can tell what is antique and what is not? So can anyone answer this question, please? Dr. So. Now, regarding Mrs. Siu's point on Europe and France, now I was giving you an answer to those questions. But if you look at the mainland, when they said antique, they use the age of 100 years before something qualifies as antique. Now, if you look at this definition, or if you use this definition, it's difficult to enforce the law, because now 1 year from now, then the line shifted. Okay, you can take reference from that. So if you look at the mainland as an example, and looking at the handcraft, hand skill, okay, an age of 100 years is something that you can use as a kind of reference. Now, but in the US, the definition of antique ivory is 100 years or above. So different countries, they do things differently, but of course we can take reference from them. But here in Hong Kong, Hong Kong being a part of China, we look at the hand skills of the sculpture, and this is very similar to the mainland, and that's why we're using this particular method. Okay, so all in all, now every jurisdiction has its own way to define what constitutes antique ivory. Now, depending on their own situation and culture, maybe their technology as well. And you are saying that 1925 is a good place to draw the line. Yes, Chairman. Please continue. Now, having defined antique ivory, now we will proceed to stages 2 and 3, and the second, third, or fourth part on import and export, or possessing or control of the substance, we've made corresponding changes. Now, if you look at C1062, section 2, now the first stage, if you look at the poached substance to come under control, now for the second stage, we are going to control even those that are pre-convention. So in section 2 of the schedule, we have to say ivory or elephant, add elephant ivory to section 2 after elephant hunting trophy. So under 4.2a, in the first stage, we have only banned elephant hunting trophy, but those before that date can be allowed to be imported. But in stage 2, we are proposing extending those that are pre-convention to be banned as well, and the exemption applies only to antique ivory. And so in section 3 on import, we have repealed pre-convention and substitute antique elephant ivory. Now for the schedule 4, the situation is the same, referring to 6.2a. The situation is the same, repeal pre-convention and substitute antique elephant ivory. Section 5, referring to Schedule 4, Section 7, on referring to Schedule 1, and then also Schedule 2. Now the treatment is the same. Originally only have elephant hunting trophy, but now we add or elephant ivory. So the control now applies not just to elephant hunting trophy, but also elephant ivory. Now I was referring to sections 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and they will come into effect in stage 2. Now section 7 is the same. This has to do with possession or control of pre-convention specimens. And I was saying that if you're looking at stage 2, then those that are pre-convention specimens will also be controlled. And so we have added 9A before Section 10. So anyone possessing or in control of a specimen that is elephant ivory, and we're talking about pre-convention. I'm sorry, now 9A, the Chinese version, C1065, it says possession or control of pre-convention specimens. So what is the meaning of that Chinese 標本的標本? Mr. Fong, please. Now, the Chinese for pre-convention is 公約前標本. We've looked at the syntax of the two languages, and they are different. So if you say simply pre-convention in Chinese, it's not very satisfactory. Well, can you just say, well, pre-convention specimen? Now, this is just a phrasing issue. I mean, if Ong Yuk-man is here, then he'll be yelling.
So please take a look whether the translation is good enough. All right, any other questions from members? Dr. So, please continue. Then we go on to 8. And schedule for 11, we are deleting A. A has to do with a pre-convention ivory, because in stage 2 we will cover pre-convention ivory as well. So we have to delete A. So in 11, we say that if it is specimen of pre-convention ivory, then application will not be allowed. And 9, the commencement date is in 3rd stage. And it deals with 11B. And B says that if it is covered by a license to possess, then the director can issue a license. But then in stage 3, our intention is that we would not issue any licenses for possession of ivory products for a commercial purpose. So for part 4, 1B, that will be repealed in stage 3. So that means we will be deleting B or repealing B. And in relation to 11, then again it's a stage, we go back to stage 2. First, we have to redefine the definition of license. That will be 2 parts. We will specify what is license. And A is if the specimen is pre-convention, that is staged to be for the commencement date of section 2710. And B is to change the commencement date of section 26 that will take immediate effect. So that comes under stage 1. So we would like to specify what we mean by specified license, and in different stages, clear definition will be given to the term. Now, section 11, if we repeal provisions for the sake of stage 3, then schedule 4, the definition of specified license is no longer needed. So in section 12, we propose to repeal the 2 definitions, i.e. the definition of amendment ordinance, specified license. So in the English version, the definition of possession license application will repeal the semicolon, and we substitute it with a full stop. All right, part 3 then. Well, we are done with the amendments to the primary legislation, and part 3 is amendment to the subsidiary legislation, and part 3 is on Cap 586A. We will deal with the meaning of personal or household effects. The way it is drafted now is that, well, it is not very clear in its meaning. The drafting is not very clear, especially for effects not belonging to a person. In legal terminology, a person can also include a legal person or really an individual. So here, we try to divide it into 2 aspects. And in the first part, if it is really an individual, then we'll set out how it's going to be dealt with. And in subsection 2, for part 3, the newly added subsection 2 will apply. So in other words, we'll try to make the exemption clearer, and it applies not only just to an individual, but also a legal person. So that is spelled out more clearly here. Any question? If not, please continue. And clause 29, just like what we did previously, we put in the footnote to spell a situation which where the provision should be disapplied. So in section 6, we add a note for a specimen that is an elephant hunting trophy. Then section 7 of Schedule 2 to the ordinance disapplies. Sorry, excuse me. So for a specimen that is an elephant hunting trophy, we should take reference to section 7 of Schedule 4 rather than the present provision. So in stage 2, we will subject ivory to regulation, and that is to say, this note, we have to add in elephant ivory on top of elephant hunting trophy. So in stage 2, elephant hunting trophy and elephant ivory, while section 7 of Schedule 4 should apply, and this section should not apply. Now, part 4, we see clause 30 here. That is similar to the handling of part 3 as mentioned earlier. So we try to set out more clearly person and legal person. So now this is an amendment to Cap 586B compared to 586A in the last page. Now clause 31, the same applies. We are adding in a note to section 5 in relation to personal household effects. And that is to say, we should see sections 5 and 8 of Schedule 4, and this provision should disapply for an elephant hunting trophy, and for elephant ivory, subsection 4 disapplies. And clause 32, the same here. We are dealing with 586B, and for stage 1, we add in a note to disapply the section, and in stage 2, we have to add in elephant ivory as well. So in stage 2, we should say for a specimen that is an elephant ivory or elephant hunting trophy, this section should disapply. So much for our amendments. So we are done with the Chinese version of the marked up copy. Legal advisor, do you have any questions on the English version or other questions in general? Legal advisor? Yes. Well, the Chinese English version convention, we have written to the administration. We asked about pre-convention. They said 公約傳的標本. We have asked whether the word標本is necessary because it doesn't correspond to the English version. And also in Section 17 and 20 of CAP 586, the pre-convention, the Chinese translation is 公約傳標本 again. So we'd like to ask the administration whether they can give us a more detailed explanation on the Chinese translation of pre-convention. So can you give us a clearer explanation on how you come up with the translation? In our reply to the legal advisor, we have set out our justification. In paragraph 25, 26, we set out the explanation. Pre-convention, we have used the term 公約前標本 in Chinese. If the Chinese sentence is 該標本屬公約前標本 it reads better than 該標本公約前. So that's how it's, we've arrived at the Chinese conversion. So since we have used the Chinese term 公約前標本 for pre-convention, so that's why the corresponding Chinese version of pre-convention ivory is 公約前標本的標本. So we think the meaning of the Chinese and English version is consistent and the same. I'm not sure about how it compares to other existing laws. As Section 17 and 20, the pre-convention expansion is 公約前標本 only. And the government's explanation, it has to tie in with the Schedule 4. But would you consider how you should make it consistent with the term being used in other parts of CAP 586? Any response, please? In Schedule 4, in the interpretation, Section 1, bracket 2, we made it very clear. The Chinese version of the pre-convention is only used in Schedule 4. So in parts other than Schedule 4, say, for example, Sections 17 and 20, the corresponding Chinese term it can be different. So that is just confined, that use is just confined to Schedule 4. All right, we are done with the clause-by-clause translation or scrutiny. So let's take a look at the government's response to the issues raised at the meeting on the 29th of November, and that is paper number CB bracket 1327/1718 bracket 02. So Mrs. Kwok, can you brief us on this paper, and then we can have a discussion. Thank you, Chairman. Wow, this is our response to the issues raised last time. Last time, the members would like us to talk about the limited exemptions allowed by the French government to outlaw the trade in ivory. Now, in 2016 August and 2017 May, the French government issued 2 orders to ban ivory trade in its territory and its overseas territories. And there are exemptions and concessions, and these are set out in detail in paragraph 2, that include, for example, use in museums for scientific and cultural uses, and also keys of keyboard instruments, bows of string instruments, and also other uses. I will not go into the details. All these are set out in paragraph 2. What is noteworthy is that the spirit behind is set out in paragraph 4. Now, in relation to the trade and commercial use of raw ivory, use of ivory products, and the sale of ivory products made after 1st of July 1975, and also repair of ivory products made after 1st of July 1975. All these uses were banned. Now, in the last meeting, you asked licensing control of import of ivory to Hong Kong since 1990 and statistics on enforcement actions. And that has to do with post-convention ivory and also pre-convention ivory import control. In 1990, elephant is listed in Appendix 1 of CITES, and after that, the import, export, and re-export have been banned, and Hong Kong has been discharging its duties under the convention, and pre-convention ivory is exempted. So under a licensing scheme, international trade can still take place. As we explained before, this is not something unique in Hong Kong. Internationally, there has been such an arrangement too. And after 1990, the pre-convention ivory can still be imported and re-exported. I mean, that's a common practice internationally. Now, last time the AFCD colleague also explained that imports of pre-convention ivory has to come with a certificate, and after the ivory comes into Hong Kong, our authorized officers will check on these pre-convention ivory. Now, as for law enforcement figures, from 1990 to November 2017, there are 840 cases of illegal smuggling of ivory, and 300 cases have got to the court and convicted.
Now, request was also made to get more information on the European situation and the various procedures adopted, as well as exemptions. Now, last time we mentioned Belgium, Germany, and Portugal, and these are, well, something that we are going to be handling this time, and we've tabled them today for your information. Now, for the 3 countries, Belgium, Germany, and Portugal, and all the EU countries, they have a more stringent application for, and the guideline of EU is that all the re-export of ivory materials will be banned, and then the EU details will have to be applied, governing re-export of sculptured ivory. There would be limited concessions made as outlined in paragraph 8, and I have also mentioned this in my response to Mr. Seal. And finally, last time members asked about what constitutes the special situation, and the director of the AFCD will actually give information on the various special cases, which we explained in paragraph 10 and 11. The overall rule is that we are not going to violate the protection of the substance. So this includes personal or household allowance effects, and the director will look at the individual situation to prevent any abuse of the document. Now, any questions from members apart from Mr. Seal? Now, Mr. Seal, I'll give you 10 minutes so you can ask all the questions you wanted to. I just want to go back to your point about some EU countries. After having the pre-convention ivory, if they have a re-export license, they can do re-export. And situations vary depending on which country you are, and that in Hong Kong we are more stringent. Now, can we be given a written reply, please? Now, let me explain further. As Dr. So said, when dealing with the antique ivory, or the pace or the phases of handling the ivory. Now, the direction is the same, but then the pace differs. And we have certain limited cases of concessions or exemptions. Now, so for France, for example, the museum artifacts or musical instrument parts and so on. And in Hong Kong, we also have exemptions suitable for Hong Kong. And we may not be able to follow the European example 100%. So we have to look at our own situation. Now, we will continue to look at exemptions applicable to Hong Kong, but without sacrificing the overall goal of environmental protection. Now, antique ivory is one such case. If it's non-commercial use, if it's for scientific purposes, for law enforcement and so on, then these will be exempted. And as in the paper says, if it's for educational use or scientific use, if it's non-profit making or non-commercial, now that's because for scientific and educational purposes, we have to allow these substances to be traded to balance the various needs. And we believe our suggestion is already well balanced. Now, I hope members will understand that Hong Kong, if we look at our history, the role we've been playing, and then there is demand for the substance in society. Now, we want to work, cooperate with other countries, and to be a point of major concern to be a part of this CITES agreement. Now, we want to give the impression that we are determined in doing something to protect the substance. Now, we've met quite a few times, and you've looked at all those situations for the EU, and there isn't any transaction pre-convention. And I now have the impression that Hong Kong is the only place allowing ivory trade before the convention, but in fact it's not the case. Now, can you give us something in writing? Now, and if you look at what about Australia and the US, what are the situations there? So is it the case that we are only one of a few places doing this? And what is the UN's requirement? Now, how come people are doing things differently in different parts of the world? Now, I just feel that the traders in Hong Kong are suffering because they are not allowed to do transactions. Now, Mr. Chan mentioned other jurisdictions because there are some ivory products, and Hong Kong is one of a few major importers. And I also understood the situation that we have to have restrictions. Okay, we have to look at other countries, but Mr. Siu, your point is that if we were to extend the network or to look at all the countries in the world, then I mean there may be a limit to what we can do. Now, we have got some pattern already from certain countries, and they operate differently. Now, but in the beginning, when we first looked at the paper, now, if memory serves, now some members are very much concerned about whether some countries would be giving the ivory traders some sort of compensation. Now, can the government tell us in greater detail what the situation is? Now, Mr. Siu also asked for a kind of a UN Council order regarding ivory trade. And is there a unified system for dealing with the issue? Now, thank you, Chair. Now, we have explained earlier, in fact, because members are concerned about compensation. Chair, I'm sorry. I'm not asking about compensation. Now, why do you have to have compensation? Because you are banning, stopping everything. So that's why you need compensation. Now, we have met many times. You are telling us that in EU, the transactions are allowed. Now, Chair, I think you asked some very good questions. You've mentioned some countries that they are major ivory producers in EU, and they are allowed to sell. Now, how come that is the case? Now, I'll try to be brief. Now, as we explained earlier, in the UN, now, what is their requirement? Now, we have to go back to 2016. The CITES signatories meeting, they passed a resolution, and that is all the signatories or even the non-signatories. If there is internal ivory market which directly or indirectly lead to African elephants being poached, then they have to do everything to regulate or even to phase out all these markets. And as I was saying, Hong Kong and several other countries have been named to be well, what about the EU countries? Are they one of the 8 on the list? No, they are not on the list. Tell us which 8 places or area. Can I ask my colleague to supplement, please? Now, my information shows that Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, and Hong Kong. Now, those places, I mean, they have elephants in those countries, but not Hong Kong. Well, there are elephants walking around, but Hong Kong, I mean, there's no, except the one in the zoo. Now, what about in Europe? Now, Mr. Siu, can you direct the question to me, please? Now, well, why are we lumped together with the other 7 countries? We don't have any elephants in Hong Kong, but what about in Europe? Now, they have ivory transactions. In fact, most of the transactions go via Europe. Now, have you looked at their situation, the EU countries, when they export these products, and what is the amount being handled? Now, not just whether we have elephants, but rather the commercial role we are playing, that we have been named as one of the 8 countries. Now, can you deal with the question from this angle? Now, the member's question has to do with the pre-convention ivory. If you're talking about post-convention ivory, then if it's for commercial purposes, the import and export has already been banned. On pre-convention ivory, now we've reported in the past that after 1990, there were about 13.9 tons and about 10,000 plus items, and according to the CITES convention, have been imported into Hong Kong, and about 13.8 tons and 19,000 plus items from European countries. And we've reported that most of these pre-convention, the 13.9 tons and the 380 items, they have already been re-exported to Hong Kong. Now, Mr. Siu, I'll give you 5 more minutes. Now, Mr. Siu, I understand you have queries on the policy issue, and on the policy angle, the government is already pretty firm on this and have explained several times in these meetings. Now, can I ask the government, will you have other amendments? No. Now, Mr. Siu, I'll give you 5 more minutes. If after your round of question, and if you've got further supplementary remarks from the government, then you can propose an amendment. Okay, I'll give you 5 more minutes. Now, I heard from the department that the pre-convention ivory, they are mostly from Europe. How come the European countries are not listed on the list? Our products are not from Kenya. We have no elephants, and we are not in Africa, and we only import products. Most of the items are from Europe. How come the European countries are not on the list, and why are we included on the list?
I've got it.
Have you tried to reflect the situation to the UN, Mrs. Kwok? On Mr. Shu's question, we can't say represent CITES to say this and that to the UN. Well, have you done something on behalf of Hong Kong? Are we a member of CITES, or we're just an observer member, or what? How is our status like in CITES? Well, this is a very good question, Chairman. CITES is a sign. The signatories are countries. So Hong Kong is part of the Chinese delegation when we are having meetings at CITES. Have you spoken on behalf of Hong Kong and asked the China to reflect the situation? We don't have elephants in Hong Kong. How come that we are included in the list of 8 and not the European countries are not included? Have you ever done that? No, we haven't, Dr. So. We haven't said that to the Chinese authorities. The pre-convention ivory was imported into Hong Kong, and that was allowed under CITES and also Hong Kong laws. Mrs. Kwok, we are one of 8 regions where this is which are places of concern, and some of them have to do with elephant poaching. The others have to do with illegal ivory trade. So Hong Kong is included in the list because of our illegal ivory trade. Now you don't. I'm sorry. Well, of course. We know about that. Hong Kong doesn't have elephants. Of course, we are involved in trade. We are not involved in manufacturing. That no need to say that. We've been holding so many meetings, and the administration said that the EU will not be allowed to do ivory trade. But in this document, we know that they're going to still are going to be allowed ivory trade, but we are listed in one of 8 regions. We don't have elephants. We have ivory trade. Where does our ivory come from? Most of them come from the EU states. So the innocent is caught, while those who are to blame, the culprits, are not caught. So how come that the EU states are not included in the list of 8? Now, after stage 3, does it mean that there should not be any activity in relation to pre-convention ivory coming from Europe. After stage 3, can pre-convention ivory still from the EU states still come to Hong Kong for commercial purpose? I asked the administration why have they not reflected the situation? Well, they said that it was allowed before. Now, all of a sudden, this is not allowed, and we're engaging in ivory trade. But most of the ivory come from EU, but then the EU states is not included in the list, and they can still go on with the trade, it seems. Well, this is exactly the purpose of the bill. Now, after stage 2, that is 3 months after the enactment of the law, so all ivory, including pre-convention and post-convention ivory, cannot come into Hong Kong. So in relation to law enforcement, all ivory is banned. So in stage 2, that will happen in stage 2, right? Yes. Okay, Mr. Shiu, I understand that you are very concerned about the trade's rights and interest. I believe that the administration will submit further papers to us. And if you have further views on the bill, maybe you can liaise with me directly, and maybe you can have a meeting with the administration to share your concern. And actually, some issues of your concern may not be able to be dealt with by the bill. Maybe you think that there has been some unfairness previously, and you're concerned about law enforcement in the future. I'm very happy to serve as a facilitator, and I will help you reflect your views or concerns to the administration. So, government administration, are you willing to have separate meetings with Mr. Shiu? These issues may not be directly related to the bill, but Mr. Shiu is very concerned about the interest of the ivory trade practitioners, and the bill has direct impact on their livelihood. Yes, we are more than happy to have a meeting. So, I think we are finished with the scrutiny of the bill, and we hope that the administration can give us supplementary papers, which will be circulated to members. And if you still have concerns, please approach me directly, and I'll help you arrange a meeting with the administration. Administration, do you have a timetable for resumption of a second reading debate? Do you have a rough timeline? We'll try to do it ASAP. We still have to provide supplementary responses to members. We'll try to do that first. And then the Bills Committee has to report to the House Committee. Still, we will try to expedite things. All right, if there are major issues and if needed, and after receiving the relevant papers, I'll see whether additional meetings have to be held. And Mr. Shiu, if you have any questions related to the trade that you want to raise, I'm very happy to arrange a separate meeting for you. So much for this meeting. I would like to thank members for your active participation. I would like to thank the administration for your very detailed explanation. Thank you.